Thank you very much, Jeremy. Yeah, so we're going to have a very fantastic panel discussion. I guess the purpose of this discussion, yes, it has to do with the content and the feedback that you'll be getting from these distinguished guests. These are not distinguished guests, they are household names in our association. You've met them on plenty occasions. They will introduce themselves over time, but I think, yes, it is not necessarily about what they are going to say. I think the point we're trying to make about this panel discussion is the fact that the RFA is a member-led organization. Louise, that has just spoken, is the leader of our cross-border working group, and that is what we want in the RFA. We want members to identify specific issues that will make a difference, firstly to their own businesses and to the industry, to take charge. All that we can do from the RFA perspective is to create a platform for that to happen. So on my left, I have Liesel. You know Liesel. She is the chair of our Green Transport working group. So one of the things that that specific working group does is to track sustainability legislation, both globally as well as locally, and look at technologies that we as members can use firstly to improve our efficiencies, but in the long term to future-proof our businesses. Liesel is going to give us feedback in terms of the work that they've done over the past 12 months or so. Next to her is Gerardus. Gerardus was the, I think that's an awesome way. So Gerardus, as you all know, Gerardus, I took over from him. Gerard was the chair of the RFA board, and Gerard is now playing a critical role in addressing some of the challenges that we as a sector face along our security challenges in particular across our key corridors. And Gerardus is going to talk about and give us feedback about some of the work that they do. On the far left, on my far left, that's MBE. You know her as well. So MBE is a member of a subcommittee of the board, which we call the Labor Relations Committee. The focal point of that committee is to ensure that we have labor peace, period. However, one of the other things that you as members would understand and know is that to run your businesses, you require assets, and these assets can run into millions. Over and above that, you carry across the border, across various towns, cargo that belongs to customers, and the ability to build harmony with your workforce and build the required trust to ensure that when your assets and the goods leave, come back, is something that is central and impactful to your businesses. And that is what Macretia is going to be talking about. And so we're not going to do this like a traditional panel discussions. They will give us feedback, all of them. They'll introduce themselves, give us feedback in terms of the work that they do, give us pointers, and thereafter we'll open it up to the audience for questions. Thank you very much. Liesel, over to you.
Thanks, Penal. Thank you so much. So I think you've introduced me pretty well. So nice to be with my RFA family. And it's been quite a busy year for the Green Transport Working Group. There's been a lot of movements in legislation. In fact, the climate change bill has been approved. It only took 13 years for that to happen. It's still awaiting for the president's signature, but very happy that it's there. What does it mean for us? It's an overarching bill that talks about all climate change issues, and it's really great to have the framework, the accountability for where it sits within government, and that's really great. Linked to that, South Africa signed the Paris Accord, which committed us to a peak, plateau, and decline trajectory for carbon emissions. And part of that, they're called NDCs, National Determined Contributions. They are starting to talk and discuss industry sectors. So we've got sectorial targets coming our way. It's not very clear, the document, as to what that would look like for us specifically, because it includes the whole transport sector. So it's aviation, shipping, passenger, rail, the whole shebang in there. But these conversations are happening, so targets are definitely coming our way, and it's linked to the net zero future. I think the net zero future is quite a difficult topic, especially for our sector. The path to net zero is not very clear. There's a lot of things that need to happen to get there, and it's built on three real pillars, which is technology, alternative fuels, and modal shift. And I think the government's approach to this will be definitely a focus on modal shift. And as we know, with the current state of Transnet, it's going to take a long time for that to happen. But that plays a key role in this trajectory. And just speaking to the theme of the conference about changing the rhythm of trucking, we are seeing a lot more. When we spoke about electric vehicles about 3-4 years ago, it really was, it's not really going to happen, or it will happen, but it'll take time, and the charging times are too long. A lot of that has been changed now, and we've seen there's phenomenal models out in the market from most of the OEMs. We have charging technology that's improved so much that you could actually charge a vehicle from 20 to 80% in under 30 minutes using a megawatt charger. So that is really, it's a technology that is going to change the rhythm of trucking. But there are a lot of nuances around that. So last mile, 100%, we see that coming in quite strongly. But we still have the challenges of the heavy duty and the cross-border trucking, which will probably have to look at something else. And my prediction there is going to be hydrogen. And there's still a lot of development happening around hydrogen. But as some of you know, last year I was part of the hydrogen study tour group in Germany. It's happening. It's real. You see charging stations with hydrogen, electric points, and alternative energy. So it's definitely not a pie-in-the-sky concept. It's here, and the time it'll take to become mainstream in South Africa, Africa particularly, is unknown, but it's already knocking on our door. We can't ignore it, and it is going to change the rhythm of trucking in the country. And I think the one thing to remember particularly is that climate change is definitely not going away. I don't really want to add it to the mix of all the big things that are happening around the world, but you saw in the risk presentation by Investec, it's still linked to natural disasters, number one. The damage it does to infrastructure is massive, and we're moving forward now into a world where a lot of this is going to happen, and how we navigate that is really going to be a determinant for long-term sustainability for our businesses. And I think Africa is used to adapting and being agile in this space. So I think we actually have an advantage there. And we also have very different operating conditions than, for example, Europe. But I also think that is to our advantage. So I'd really like to encourage all of you as members to please partake in our working group. The idea of the working group is not just for me to host and go and attend the abuser meetings and find out the legislation. It's for you as members to be part of, to discuss and debate these new technologies. There are so many nuances and different perceptions about EVs, for example, even hydrogen. And we need to be able to have a forum where we talk about it, where we discuss it and debate it. And I think we're going to have a lot more of these conversations in the future. And we need to collaborate together to reach potential sectoral targets that are coming our way, but also to make sure that we leave the planet in a better space than what it currently is in. And we have a bit of time to get there and navigate there, but it's really important that the conversations are being had. And that just leads me to my closing statement, is getting back to the middle ground and being pragmatic. Sustainable financing is a topic that is really coming to the fore. Technologies exist, but they do come at a premium. How do we finance it? How do we get the commercial model to work? And there's a lot of work that needs to be done there, because they are more expensive, and with margins under pressure, you can't really just, you have to run a sustainable business. And the Banking Association of South Africa actually now, in this coming week, are having a whole conference around sustainable financing. And a lot of our last Green Transport Working Group, we had a banking representative there to come and talk to us and explain what exactly it is. So there's a few sustainable financing options coming. Some of the OEMs are even looking at assisting assisting logistics companies in that space. So we'll definitely keep you abreast of that moving forward. Thanks, Penal.
Thank you very much, Liesel. Gerardus, over to you.
Well, the last time somebody called me Gerardus was my wife, and she was angry with me at that stage. But let's leave it at that. To talk to you about the security challenges that we face, I need to define that first, and then try and give the solutions in terms of that. So these definitions that I'm using is my own definitions. There's no scientific research in terms of that. It's just how I have categorized it in the work that we're busy doing. So the first problem that we face is what I term syndicate criminality. And under that, we put all the hijacks, the containers that goes missing, the depots that gets hit, the processes whereby loading and offloading points are targeted. The key element is that there's a significant external force, and they are normally very sophisticated and trying to do the necessary harm. The second definition is mass or common criminality. And that is very much more opportunistic of nature. Now, the biggest risk as transporters have is the moment our truck gets caught up in some form of congestion. And immediately we become almost like sitting ducks. Louise was talking about the Bombo border post. The longest queue was 42.7 kilometers. That was the peak. The information that I had yesterday, we were down for average for the day on 2.7, which is a significant improvement. But the moment you've got that number of vehicles standing toe to toe, you are a target. Now, that congestion can be caused by insufficient border processing, insufficient and ineffective harbors, but it could also be an accident on the N3, and all of a sudden we all have to stop and slow down. And then the other problem, everybody that has got a service delivery problem migrate to the biggest road close by and close off the road. And I wish they would realize that nobody remembers them for what they were actually protesting against. We all just remember the road that was closed. So immediately we've got congestion, and congestion creates that opportunity. The third definition is what I call traffic criminality. And that's more about what our drivers and everybody in this room which drives on the road do. So typically, when we hit a congestion, we don't have any problem with infrastructure development in South Africa, because a 2-lane road becomes a 6-lane road. And everybody rush and continue just what they want to do. That causes certain processes of security problems that will come in. The last one is what I just termed corruption. Now, I don't want to go into all the corruption issues. I just want to highlight 2 issues in terms of corruption. The first one is it takes 2 to tango. And the only way which we can stop it is if somebody says no. And I really want to implore you that, the same as what Louisa just said, is say no. The second part of that is actually more to do with the statement that Gavin made right in the beginning when he said, we are complying ourselves out of business. And Ongama was asking now, which way do we see that going? It's not to say, let's all break the rules. It is to say, how do we get everybody to play by the rules? And we need to see, how can we do that? Now, those are the 4 that we have. How do we resolve this? All of them has got one common thread that will assist us, and that is information. Now you say to me, information, we've got SAPs, they've got all of this information. Interested, I sat in a meeting, and one of the major operators had a discussion with this poor general of SAPs, and at one stage we were talking about the figures, and he said, General, on my books, we are investigating more truck hijacks than what you've got on the national basis. That's one operator. Why? It doesn't get reported, and there's many reasons for that. They don't need a police case to ensure that. Most people are self-insured. If your truck is then in a hijack and you report it, it becomes part of the crime scene, it is impounded, and you'll get a quarter of your truck back, and the load would be missing anyway, plus the truck cannot operate for, 4, 5, 6 weeks. So it's a major problem with information that is not available. So that's the first one, specifically on the syndicated process. But also when there's mass information or mass protest action or accidents or congestion, we need to have that information. Why? So that you can react upon that. And I will come back to how we want to deal with all of that. Traffic is an element of congestion, but there it's more about sharing the information that we behave in the correct manner onto the road. We don't need to have 6 lanes when there's only 2 lanes. We don't need to jump every queue to try and get there quicker. We don't need to run on every little R road to bypass the N4, because the only thing that happens, we create a problem in the community. So let's just think and brief our drivers on the efforts regarding that. And then the last one on the corruption. If we can start sharing the information of who is not compliant, we need to take that one step further to make sure that those organizations that has got the teeth to address it start to address that. Now, that holistic process is we cannot do whatever we do on our own. We will have to work with law enforcement agencies. We'll have to work together with government. I'm not saying you need to stop your private security. By all means, you need to have that. You need to have all your tracking, all those processes. That's normal business. But we need to be part of the narrative to influence that. When the Lebombo border problem became at its height and the Challengers gang were assaulting and the taxi association was assaulting drivers, at one stage SAP said to me, you know what, you need to package your crime to be more sexy, because this is basically common theft and assault. It's not as sexy as when we try and catch 500 illegal miners. Well, it's wrong because it's still breaking the law. We need to change that narrative. We need to change that narrative with the authorities, with the law enforcement agencies. And that's what we need to do. So how do we want to do that? We are about to launch a WhatsApp so that you can report whatever you can. Any crime, any protest. Already we've got the RFA general grouping, which gives you a lot of information about where problems are. We're trying to enhance that so that you can have more information. We're bringing out a report, a pulse report, that will give you what are the congestions in the ports, in the harbors, in the various areas and the corridors, so that you can have that information. If anybody is interested, please just come to me, give me your email address. I will arrange that you start getting the beta versions right now until it is formally launched. Why? Because we want to have those trends, but we also need the information to come back so that we can then sit down with government and the various agencies so that we can have better law enforcement. Again, to use the example of Lebombo, when that problem was his height, we managed to get SAPS to deploy 47 additional officers into that area. But RTMC, the traffic guys, deployed zilch, nothing. And it was an issue, they said we didn't have money. Yes, they got a roasting from the presidency because you can't say that. Bottom line, they still did not deploy. So we need to work with these institutions to be able to guide them and be part of that narrative to get there. And then very critical, we need to report those non-compliant companies. And how we intend doing that is actually utilizing the National Logistics Crisis Committee. Give us names, we will give it to the Bargaining Council. First go and check. If they're not compliant, then what are you going to do about that? And that's why we use the NLCC, because now there's a big stick. I think Neo spoke about the feedback to the presidency every 6 or 8 weeks. Yes, that is happening. But there's also feedback from the working groups every 2 weeks. And that feeds up to the presidency. So we just need that big stick to say, what have you done to address this corruption? Because if you're breaking the law deliberately, that's nothing else than corruption. So that we can get a better process, so that we don't end up complying ourselves out of order. So information critical. We really need that to be part of that. 2, we want to make sure that you participate in some of the structures such as the anti-hijack forums, which the security interest group are actually very active in. The figures is that in Cape Town, after 2 years, truck hijackings down with 50%. Now we're busy setting up what is happening in Mpumalanga, what is happening in the Eastern Cape, what is happening in KwaZulu-Natal. All those anti-hijack forums runs on provincial level. We're also trying to put together a national, for a lack of another word, they got all kinds of interesting acronyms, whereby we want to share, let's engage with SAPS, with RTMC, with the State Security Agency. Let's make sure that we get that narrative of what we need out there. Sometimes they're going to listen, sometimes they're not going to listen. But if we don't do that effectively, they will never listen to us. And that's the plea. When the WhatsApp gets launched, please use that. Please report to us. And those of you that want to have the Pulse report, it will be formally launched, but if you want it in the meantime, come to me, I'll give it to you, but also give us feedback on how we can improve it so that it can really benefit you, so you don't get caught in these 4 levels of definitions that I've given. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerard. Round of applause, please. MBE.
Thanks, Benwell. Good afternoon, everybody. So I always get the benefit of talking about the stuff that the ops guys could really not care less about. And a little disclaimer, my husband is an ops guy, so I'm not picking on anybody. First-hand info about how things are done, how they should not be done, and how I want them to be done. I think the big issue for me today is I have a little bit of a problem, and in the interest of trust, I will explain, I'll be forthcoming with what the problem is. I was obviously going to use the Bokke and Rassi to explain trust in leadership and the results that you get once that's there, but I think that ship has sailed, so I'm a little bit in uncharted territory right now. So I'll bring it a little bit closer to home. And Marius is always the subject. So this morning in getting ready for today, I had a little bit of a conundrum in terms of my footwear. Was I going to wear flats or heels? Obviously, flats are more comfortable. That should be the main focus. But I trusted my husband enough to ask for his opinion. He trusted me enough to tell me his honest opinion. And it went something like, "Nee skat, dra daai heels, jy moet bietjie hoogte kry." Only, obviously, to enter the room once we were starting to get ready for the presentation and realize that we were going to be sitting and not standing. So, you know, no height required. Dankie, Marius. But
I was
think,
never going to win that one.
But I think the importance of that is that when you hear the statement that there's a direct correlation between trust, harmony, productivity, and profitability, would you agree? And you can use that and apply it in any type of relationship, be it the workplace, be it in your private space, be it politics. Hopefully we're going to vote for people that we trust to act in the interest of the country. Hopefully you, like my beloved husband, trust your spouse enough to be brutally honest with him at times that it is required. And hopefully your spouse trusts you enough to be able to be that brutally honest and accept that you are going to be accepting what they tell you as the truth. So if you look at the word trust, I think if we had to break it down in terms of just the letters of the word, if we could be that basic, is trust speaks to truth. Trust is not earned if there isn't truth to the relationship. It has to be there. Understanding is important. If we do not have an equal base of understanding, trust can't be there. Respect. Sorry, I missed a letter. Respect is equally important in a trust relationship. If there's truth and respect and understanding, then theoretically, trust should be achievable. And that understanding, the truth and respect needs to be sustainable for that relationship to be sustainable. If you take that back to your workplace, surely it makes sense then that if your employees do not trust your leadership, they won't respect you. They won't be bothered to try and understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. And the relationship is not going to be sustainable. And at the end of the day, you'll have a threat of employee unhappiness, which could lead to disruption in the workplace. You don't facilitate employee loyalty, and without employee loyalty, productivity goes out the window, and guess what? Profitability is now not even on the table. And I think that's something that we don't talk enough about. I think in businesses, especially in the trucking industry and where operations is the main focus, the trucks need to run. That's it. We need to turn profit. That's it. But I think in the whole process, and I know a certain someone that's going to tell me I'm sitting here with my socialist tendencies again this morning, but in the whole process, I think we sometimes lose sight of the fact that your employees is your most important asset. And people seem to take it for granted. People seem to think that, seem to think that, but they must just do the job. They get paid to do a job. If you consider the fact that most of us spend 80% of our lives in the workspace, how on earth can you not put two and two together and understand and realize that that workspace needs to be conducive for employee, if for lack of a better word, happiness? It needs to be conducive for somebody who wants to go to work and wants to not only take a paycheck home. And the only way you do that is if you get employees merged into the trust relationship. And I think the bigger issue is to make them feel that they are part of that trust that you are garnering. Employees who are made shared owners, employees who are contributors, don't necessarily just pitch for work to get a paycheck. Employees who are contributors because they feel part ownership of your business. Those people ensure that the business runs to the full capacity and bring returns on your investment. And so that's the space in which I dabble, and that's the space that we try and facilitate from an RFA perspective in the employee relations sphere. I can tell you one thing. This year, our collective agreement under the Bargaining Council has been negotiated for the past 12 years without disruption, without a strike linked to the negotiations. Guys, it's not because we sit there and we cleverly put numbers together. It's because of trust between the parties. And people mistakenly accuse us of, being in bed with labor, with the unions. So many companies tell me when I first engage with them, or when they invite me the first time to come and have a chat to them about, possible interventions, etc. And the first thing is, how do we get the union out? And my response is, you don't. You don't. They're a partner. Get the union to trust in your leadership, and your employees will trust in your leadership. And in that way, you will be able to overcome the biggest problems and jointly, again, foster a trust relationship that will eventually support your business and will definitely show on your bottom line. I go to board meetings and exco meetings and people talk about the bottom line, And employee relations, not in the same boardroom, not in the same discussion. It's a by the by. It's a by the by, oh, we'll invite you to come and, give us an update on the union figures. I mean, come on. What are we doing? And so I hope that when you hear the word trust or when you read it somewhere, that some of this will resonate. And I hope that we understand that as leadership, we need to be able to communicate transparently. We need to have some degree of emotional intelligence. It's a real thing. It exists. And I think to a degree it can be taught. So if you struggle, speak to me. And we have to be aware have situational awareness. We are working with people, with lives, with personal problems, with personal issues. Do your employees trust you enough to come and tell you if they've got a major problem at home? And if your answer to that is no, I think you've got a problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And maybe before we open it up for questions from the audience, MPE, if you could just explain the RFA's office bearer structure that members can have access to help them with dispute resolution and interventions that would help them build this harmony that we all require in the workplace to improve our productivity.
Yes, so we have a whole panel of office bearers within the RFA, all industry experts in the labor relations arena that is available to members. All sort of telephonic advice and engagements is free of charge. Obviously, if you want me there in person, me or any of the other 25, then there will be a fee applicable. We do anything and everything related to employee relations, so from just advice to supporting you with disciplinary preparations, representation at the Bargaining Council or the CCMA in disputes, Section 189 engagements, 197 agreements, all those sorts of things. And as I say, it's a panel with people that's got years and years of experience. And then we also have the benefit of Cliff Decker-Hofmeyer, that is the RFA's legal team. So you go get a lot of pro bono calls from me. He just doesn't know it at the time. But yes, so we have a very good support base from a legal perspective in terms of any legal disputes related to labor.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, just to build rapport with the audience. Questions for any of the panelists?
My name is Howard Nkosha from NJ. My question goes to Lizzo. On the good things that you're doing around curbing climate change, as we know that vehicles are, one of the contributors into that. But you've mentioned some electric vehicles, hydrogen-powered vehicles coming. What is your position around liquefied natural gas or compressed natural gas? Is that something that you're also looking into?
Yeah. So that has come up quite a lot in industry and discussions. And every single alternative technology has its role, but it's kind of seen as a stepgap to either hydrogen when it becomes mainstream, which is probably around 2030, 2032 potentially. And also, one of the big problems that we're facing is Sasol is turning off their supply of gas to industry. So much so, we actually have a booster working group, and they're talking about gas ground zero day, so it's a bit of a challenge. So I think security of supply with that technology is a bit difficult. It's not to say it doesn't have its place, and that's the thing. With each of these alternative technologies for vehicles, they all have their various nuances and applicability. you're not going to get a one-size-fits-all. It will be a combination of the technologies. The fact remains is that technology exists, and it's solid technology, and it's deployable. You know, the only challenge is financing and those kind of things that make it commercially viable. But we definitely, out of all the technologies available, EV is definitely leading the pack. And my prediction is hydrogen will too when we get there. And I think there's a lot happening on the back end around that. I mean, a year ago, you would think hydrogen is sort of, you know, we've heard talks around it and so forth, but I mean, I've driven in a hydrogen car in the Mirai, and it's phenomenal. I was like fangirling over this thing. But, you know, it's coming. And the question is, how adaptable will we be as an industry to change our rhythm and adapt to this new technology? In fact, I'd like to ask a question to the audience. If the technologies, let's say EVs, for example, was commercially viable right now, how many of you would deploy electric vehicles in your fleet? Show of hands, just randomly.
All of us.
Never say never. My favorite quote is Mandela's quote about it's not impossible until it's done.
He said 60 days now.
So,
All right.
you know, this is also another misnomer, right? You used to say you must power your electric vehicle from the grid. Yes, there is a cost implication, but you know, South Africa has the highest solar radiation levels in the world. You know, we need to start thinking a little bit out of the box. We need to start looking at the art of the possible.
All right. No, thanks for that. Any more questions? All right. Oh, I don't see that. Yes? Just wait. They will give you a mic.
Hello, Tibbs Phillips, Peterbilt Transport. With regards to the obviously alternative fuels and that, you know, there's always a possibility for going green, but the biggest hindrance to it is we talk about EVs, we talk about that, the range. That is where the problem is. And you look at this conference, I think every major sponsor we've had is a fuel company, I think. And I think we need more of a partnership with them, and what are they going to give that we can have those suppliers? They talk about all these stations that are around for diesel for us. For us to convert and change, we also have to hear that initiative. What are we going to get on that? And what have you heard, or what have they said possibility-wise of these outer depots in order to allow us to move forward, but also to get the value of it? Not everyone in this room does small distribution hubs. If we were all small distribution hubs, we would have been having intermodal, and rail would have been up and running. So I think that's the biggest question, is where are they with regards to our transformation?
All right. Any other question? Abdul? And yeah, Abdul will be last. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, and we will then answer the questions. And
Thanks,
I'm sure you
Pedro.
all want to go to lunch.
Yeah, Liesel, just to yourself, I think you spoke about a bill that's somewhere to be signed. We're talking about stuff like incentives and that we learn from Europe, and where the authorities and the government gets involved. What's the plan for the RFA and that to lobby stuff like that? Because these technologies, as we said, from a financing perspective, it is a tall order and it's a big mountain to climb.
Yes.
We definitely need incentives for those technologies to become a reality and become, I would call it, cost-effective. Thanks.
So, yes, Liesel, you will have to answer both questions in a minute.
In a minute,
Yeah,
done.
and thereafter we're done. Thank you.
Okay, so the range of the vehicles is improving rapidly, and that is a technology growth trajectory. So they're improving a lot. Yes, there would have to be collaboration with, for example, the fuel majors to create sort of, I think fuel stations or stops are going to be different in the future, because you could have a hub that would do hydrogen and electric vehicles, but that is still far in the future, but it's conversations that will have to be had. And you'll be surprised that we actually have quite a grid network of charging stations actually in South Africa, and more than what you would think. So I'm happy to send you a link. You can have a look, but it's definitely growing. And the more vehicles sort of become mainstream, the easier it's going to be to justify those commercials in terms of setting up those hubs. So it's definitely not going to happen in isolation, and it's something that's been looked at. Abdul, in response to your question, I think the RFA can predominantly lobby and work with, for example, NAMSA. Work together to try and see what we can do, because it's also in the interest of the OEMs to make sure that those tax incentives are improved or increased, because it's going to help with the uptake of the technology. And it is frustrating because import duty on these vehicles is really high, and everybody wants to embrace it. They want to do part of it, but the numbers aren't just making sense right now. So from an RFA perspective, we work really strongly in lobbying and collaborating with other associations to help our voice get heard. But it's a long journey, unfortunately. I think in the meantime, we have to do what we need to do to reduce our emissions as much as possible.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Liesl. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, that is the end of our panel discussion. And thanks to our panelists. I think please do use the Menti app. If you have additional questions, we will direct them to the panelists, and you'll definitely get your responses. And thank you guys. Give them a round of applause, and over to you, Jeremy.